Now, eNCA is in possession of the details of Thabo Bester's supposed death that were handed to Home Affairs by officials of the Magaung Correctional Facility. We asked the question, how was it possible to process this supposed death in the time frame given? Senior reporter Aviwe Mtila is covering this particular angle of the story and joins us now for an update. A very good afternoon to you, Aviwe Mtila. So you've spoken to a crime expert, Professor Jacob Mofokeng, about this case. What exactly did he have to say?
Well, colleague, glaring inconsistencies in the reports that we have, also the post-mortem that we have. Ordinarily, what's supposed to happen when there is an unnatural death within a prison is that the Correctional Services Act dictates that, in fact, there's supposed to be an inquest into the death. That means then that the SAPS sweeps into the scene and does its investigations, but that is not in silo, of course. Forensics itself is supposed to conduct their own investigations as well as correctional services. In fact, they have to do site inspections into the cell, which is now the crime scene, and try to picture exactly what happens. We do pick up a lot of inconsistencies into how this happened. For one, we do know that the post-mortem was already done by the 4th of May. That's a day later after Bester allegedly burnt into the cell. And already there were glaring inconsistencies and, well, in fact, indicators that the person that burnt into that cell was not Bester. For one, we do know there's gashes in the head that the police minister spoke of, in fact, in the briefing that took place 2 days ago. Also, the person that was found dead there was already dead. He did not have smoke inhalation in the lungs. Just some of what was picked up, for example, even the height of Bester did not match that of the deceased in the cell, as well as just the body mass itself was much lighter and he was much shorter than Bester. So already the post-mortem, just a day later, painted out that the person was possibly not Bester, but still that did not reach correctional services, as they say that they only had that just some 2 weeks ago in March already. So that would talk as to how they didn't work in silos. But also, colleague, the body was not supposed to be released, the body of the deceased, until all these investigations were done and complete. And in fact, it was determined the identity of the person in the cell and maybe also the identity, if indeed it was Bester. So it was not even supposed to be given to Dr. Nandipha Makutumana, as we do understand that he went on then to be cremated. But let's take a listen at what the professor had to say just around what has happened and all these glaring inconsistencies.
You cannot release a crime scene, until all the parties that process that particular crime scene are satisfied and they discuss among themselves that from the collection of the evidence until the results are coming back from the lab that provides with the conclusive evidence that indeed, all the other aspects are covered, such as the physical evidence, fingerprints, and in this case, we can see that, the person was already dead, when the fire was set alight, and also the report indicated that the person died because of a blunt object. So in this particular case, there was supposed to be an agreement, amongst the parties or stakeholders to say that we should not release this particular body. And then until then, we called the, close relatives like the mother, and to be able to take a DNA, to check, despite the inconsistencies of the evidence to indicate that this particular deceased, is shorter as compared with Thabo Bester, and probably the body mass is also a bit lighter as compared with that of an alleged deceased person. So there were glaring inconsistencies. So in this case, then the body was not supposed to be released, as well as the crime scene was not supposed to be released until all this evidence, and then the public was supposed to be informed that there are certain inconsistencies that were observed, during the investigation of this particular incident, and henceforth, then the body cannot be released to the family member, despite, whether a particular person will come and cite religious observations and all those kind of things. But according to the South African law, a body cannot be released if, a forensic evidence has not yet been concluded, the process has not been concluded.
Aviwe, many people may feel that the South African government failed in this case with the escape of Bester happening in the first place. What is the response to that particular notion?
Well, correctional services will tell you that all these investigations were concluded some 2 weeks ago, and they had the final confirmation of, in fact, the DNA results that were taken by with the mother, confirming that, in fact, it was not Bester some 2 weeks ago. But it just makes you wonder, colleague, if it's them turning a blind eye, or are they in a compromising situation? Because just a day later, as I mentioned, on the 4th of May, 2022, already the postmortem was out, suggesting that the person that was in the cell, one, did not die in the cell. He was already dead by the time that he was there, and possibly it could not be Bester, given the height and all of the other suggestions that were painted out there. But also, it just makes me shudder to think what else happens there, because we know, colleague, of course, Bester himself, while he was in prison, there's a time where he was addressing a conference purporting to be in New York, suited out in a tuxedo, but he was in prison. So, of course, a lot of help with that, the money that's also put in there. It makes me shudder, to think what also happens and how widespread all of this is. In fact, anti-crime activist Yusuf Abramji paints out a picture, maybe how widespread all of this is.
Well, the big worry is, has this type of thing not happened to other inmates and other people before? The mere fact that these people got away with it for over a year does raise a lot of questions. How wide is the corruption and the irregularities within the Correctional Services Department? Do we have other inmates that really pulled off the same trick? That needs to be the subject of an investigation. It does raise a lot of questions. Clearly, the Department of Correctional Services and the Department of Justice has failed South Africans in this particular case, and there needs to be a massive investigation into the levels of corruption. We know that our prison officials are often very corrupt. We know inmates easily get drugs into prison. They commit crimes from prison.
Thank you very much, senior reporter Aviwe Mtila, joining us there on the update on that particular angle of the Thabo Bester case. How does it come to be that not only do these criminals have access to devices like cell phones, suits and the like in prison, but how an entire escape is orchestrated with legal documents, as has just been described there?